Go. So yes, and actually I lied to you about what liners was. Sorry about that. It's seedlings and liners. And so seedlings are seedlings from seed, little tiny baby trees. And liners is in the trade, those are grafted plants. So we specialize both in young seedlings and young grafted plants. So unless you're part of the biz, liners would mean absolutely nothing to you. So I kind of had it flipped when we talked earlier. So, but this time I'm going to talking about the other project, which is sorry, I have something in my face. Growing the native seed that I started over 22 years ago. But one thing I want to encourage everybody, if you are interested in seeing some of our restoration work and our native seed production areas, just sign up at our website. You can just hit the contact us page and it'll send me an email saying we'd like to sign up for your distribution list. And I hope I won't run into the annual meeting, so either end of May or sometime in June. I want to give a tour of the seed production areas, which you're going to see right now. And that also includes oak and prairie and riparian habitat on the working farm, which is my next goal, is just to restore as much of this habitat on the farm as I possibly can that hasn't seen a plow. So please sign up for the tours. And here we go. So let's see. It is, oh, there we go. I'm going to use my thing. So the need for seed is growing. Yay. We're seeing much more done on roadsides. There's reclamation, especially in the Great Basin area of grazed lands, and of course, restoration work here in the valley. And I wanted to talk about some really neat things that are happening here in Oregon that's just really renewing the focus on this type of prairie habitat that's in deep doo-doo right now. So in 2022, the Fish and Wildlife Service has started this pollinator conservation program, and it's working collaboratively with lots of partners such as agencies, policymakers, and scientists to implement conservation that benefits pollinator species. And of course, you know, pollinators need plants, so that's where we're filling that niche. I love this. I got this little blurb through an email from my boss, from Jeff Merkley. He's recently secured funding for Western monarch butterfly conservation, and it's the Western populations. That's really cool. And as he says, we really have an insect Armageddon in America, and it's having a huge impact for our pollinators. And that's everything from bees to butterflies, if you will. So we've got a senator on board with pollinator conservation here in the West. In 2020, well, actually prior to 2020, I and other restoration professionals and people working on oak and prairie were asked to sort of be part of this cooperative to create a strategic plan to how to create more meaningful habitat in the Willamette Valley, because it's so fragmented right now. And fragmentation, as many of you know, is no way to actually do meaningful conservation on the species level. So that was started in 2020. And then this year, the Fish and Wildlife Service has decided how they can implement that strategic plan by creating these core conservation areas where these sites that are larger with rare plants and really, relatively good habitat in private lands or with agencies, they're going to work to secure easements on those for perpetual protection. So that's just moving forward this year as a proposed plan. If anybody Googles that, you're going to learn a whole lot about that plan. And as part of that implementation, one of our restoration sites we've worked at on our farm near Jefferson has just been granted a conservation easement with the Fish and Wildlife Service. So all this work we've done down there since 2005, creating 230 acres of restored oak and prairie habitat, which looks really, really good. I worked really hard to try to crack the code on a lot of this stuff. And it's going to be protected forever. Yay. And it's really providing this big block of habitat. We have a site to the north of us. It's right from near Ankeny Wildlife Refuge. And then just over the hill down in the flats near Marion is another large site. So there's like 4,000 acres of protected land near Salem. So that's a big feather in the cap. So restoration, as I said, starts with plants, right? So, and they're used year round by critters of all kinds. And you'll see from all the photos, I like to take a lot of pictures of bugs. I don't know what most of them are, but I just find it fascinating because it makes me realize what's using all these plants that we're trying to grow for seed to create habitat. So this is the habitat value right here, looking at these photos. And it starts in early April with some of our very early blooming plants like wintergreen. This is Barbaria orthoceras with a mining bee. We've got our camas, which all of us know and love. And this little solitary bee going for the nectar spur at the bottom instead of out through the top. Plectritis with a bumblebee just full of pollen on its legs. Coming into the summer, we find all kinds of different pollinators. We've got a hoverfly on some Ligusticum. And then, of course, we get our blooming time in. We have our milkweeds that start to bloom in July, swallowtails, monarchs, sulfurs, all kinds of different butterflies and bumblebees going for the milkweed. My favorite plant, because we don't have a lot that bloom in August, is Asclepias fascicularis. It's narrow-leaved milkweed, and those are queen bumblebees going, oh, thank you so much, because they need to keep foraging so that they can nest over the winter. So these late bloomers are very, very key to that happening. And then in summer, I mean, I love late summer, walking through the prairie and almost running into a yellow garden spider and going, you know, so you don't want to do that. But you've got scaffolding. These spiders just are all over the native plants when you look. And I love that little picture of the crab spider just sitting in there in its lair waiting to grab some food. And of course, with the insect diversity, you get all of the bird diversity, as most of our songbirds feed their babies on bugs. Douglas Tallamy's Bringing Nature Home, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that, really imparted the importance of native plants to attracting our native insects, and that provides food for our songbirds. So it's a win-win all over by putting native plants. This is in every single presentation I give, because this is the whole key. So what we're doing on what we're trying to do is to be part of these growers that want to spend the time and energy to grow these plants that are not agricultural plants. They're not programmed to set seed all at the same time. So they really have to be, you have to be really creative when you do this. And there's not very many growers out there in the Willamette Valley, maybe 4 growers. And we're one of the crazy people doing a lot of the small plots. So you've really got to like opportunities and challenges to get into this business. And you know, we have some people who are really good at doing just, you know, some of our native grasses can be done very traditionally and in larger, like an acre at a time. That's very standard for some growers. So that's good. And then you have people like me who are just really stubborn about trying to find ways to grow and harvest these things. And, you know, some of them, like milkweed, needs to be harvested every day for weeks and weeks and weeks. But it's well worth it because we get these plants back in the ground. So as my introduction alluded, I couldn't be doing this if I didn't have owners of Heritage Seedlings that had a very deep stewardship ethic. They wanted to restore land on their properties. They hired me to do that. And then we started the seed production program because we couldn't find any high diversity amount of seed on the market, especially for oak and prairie, which are upland sites. This was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was mostly wet prairie species that were out there. And I think the niche that we're filling is that we're not just growing, we're not just growers, we're users of the product. And then we provide lots and lots of information about our restoration journey. And then that helps actually create our own market. So people come oftentimes to buy seed from our company, even though they could buy the same thing from another grower, because of, you know, our connection to actually using it and providing information on how to use it appropriately so that you're not wasting this precious, precious wild seed. And it's not cheap either, so you don't want to waste it. So with what I wanted to do was again, filling what wasn't out there, which is diversity, diversity, diversity. So that took me thinking out of the box, and I didn't go to agricultural school. I have a master's in biology, and that's it. And I learned how to be a farmer. So I thought really early on, since I didn't know anything and I was just learning, I thought it was good to keep everything really small. And by keeping production blocks small, it allowed us to add each species each year. So I started with like 10, and then I could go up to 15 and 20. And as I kind of figured things out, I thought that was prudent since we were just starting from scratch. And it also let me see, well, okay, if we grow it, are they going to buy it? One of the biggest complaints I heard from growers that I met that had been doing it for years in the 90s was, well, I'm sitting on thousands of pounds of seed nobody wants to buy. And it was because they tried to treat it like a normal agricultural crop and planted big fields, and then they sat there and got upset and disappointed because they walked before, you know, they ran before they walked. And so I said, oh, I'm not going to fall into that pitfall. I'm going to actually go small and try to figure out the best way to do this within a budget. And again, I'm not sitting on seed. I don't sit on seed very long, which is good. Some seed sells out the same year that I grow it. Couple years at best, because it will lose viability over time. And again, each year adding more and more and more diversity. So as I said in the intro, I have tried to grow about over 120 species. I'm currently a bit over 100. There are some species that just have not been very cooperative and have been just a little too hard for a lot of the different challenges I'll talk about soon. But I feel pretty good about the 100 that we're growing. We have lots of small plots, 230. It's like a big garden. It's a 40-acre garden, and every single one of them needs to be tended just as if it was a garden. So it's not a one-stop shopping, do everything the same at all. But we produce about 4,000 pounds of commercial seed a year. And luckily, although the ornamental woody part of the nursery did subsidize, so to speak, the beginning, it really started to kick in about 2008, and in 2011 we got a very generous contract cooperative agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service to provide high diversity seed mixes, which they couldn't get anywhere else. And that really helped. And then the word got out, and it's like, oh, great. If I start preparing my sites, I can actually start getting seed. So this was an older talk, and from 16 till now, again, it's just going up, and my cost, my inputs are staying relatively flat. And that's what's important from a business standpoint. So how I can grow them, there's lots of different ways you can grow plants for seed production. You can sow them directly, or you can start them as plants. And I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of both methodologies and where I sort of gone for the most part. So some of the things you have to think about when you're producing seed, I mean, is like, well, is it short? Is it tall? Does it mature all at once? Does it mature like over a 1 week period, 2 week period, 3 week period? How do I have to harvest it? Can I use a machine? Do I have to use my hands? And then a very common production method for small plots are these ground cloths. It's weed barrier cloth. And I'll talk more about how things that have worked with that and not. So seed yields too. That was, well, I tell you, the learning curve on that one. So I'd have this beautiful field of balsam oryza. Oh, it was gorgeous. And I'd get like 6 pounds of seed off of a you know, less than 1/10 of an acre plot, all hand collected before the birds ate the dang thing. And it was so frustrating. And then you have yarrow, you have achillea, which can be machine harvested. And, you know, you're getting 50, 60 pounds out of 1/10 of an acre plot, you know, and there's the smiley face. So it just is so incredibly variable. So in the beginning, I just pretty much did a standard. I was learning to be a farmer, so I direct sowed everything with this little teeny tiny seed drill. I still have this. And since we have very little bits of seed, I had to figure out how to seed. I wasn't going out and seeding, you know, a 10-acre field with the seed drill. I was doing, you know, 20th of an acre plot or 10th of an acre plot, which doesn't take much seed. So we got pretty creative, I think. So I like to call it my speed drilling recipe because it's so fast. I mean, it really was amazing. We got 10 acres done in less than half of a day. Our very first year we started bigger production. So you take this little tiny little ounce or 2 of seed. You have to put a cutting agent so that it can actually go that full 1/10 of an acre. So we use vermiculite. It suspends the seed very well. And then we, you know, reuse and recycle from the beginning. These are chemical jugs that we made into funnels. And then we, you know, put them in the back of the drill, and you just hold on for dear life because the fields are very bumpy. That used to be me. It's now usually my crew people. And then I just sat back and watched them grow. And I took copious amounts of photos of when did they germinate. You know, it was amazing to learn all the different how plants grow and what they need to kick them into germination. So direct sowing has some really good things about it. It's really good for annuals and short-lived perennials because you're going to have to rotate those lands. You can't let them volunteer. It creates just a disaster and you don't get any, you know, your yields just tank. It's very fast. Again, 2 people, 15 minutes, 1/10 of an acre, you're done. Annuals in really good soil and good growing conditions can have very high yields. And but for other reasons, some of the cons we found, you know, species that germinate late winter seem to do better, because if you germinate in the winter or in the fall, you have weather problems. You have erosion, sheet erosion just wiped out so many fields, freezing, frost heaves. Now the plants are dead. Species that germinate later are just buried in the soil, and so when they pop after the nasty weather. Weed control is really hard, really hard. You try to create what's called the scale seed bed, which is a chemical fallow, but it really was hard to achieve with a lot of our flowers are native weeds. And so I could never get a field clean enough by just letting it sit for a couple of years. Tiny seeded species would just persist. People who do this, you often need wider spacing because they'll do it's like row cropping, where you can cultivate between them for weed control, but then you need to be able to get between the plants and you're losing, you know, precious land when you do that. So plugs, this is my favorite thing to do now. So I grow a lot of my crops. I start as plugs. And it really is great because especially these wild collections, if any of you've collected seeds, you're going out many times trying to collect little teeny tiny grams of seed. Well, now if you're going to plant them in plugs, it doesn't take very much. And you're going to capture all the genetics of that little tiny bit of precious seed by growing them as plants. And then we can mechanically plant them using a 3-row transplanter. Really simple for the guys to do this. And the best thing is we found a pre-emergent that works. That's something that is a chemical that will reduce the weeds coming up, and the plants, most of the plants, I can use this pre-emergent mix that somebody helped me develop. And you start clean and you keep it clean, because by the time then you get the natives filling in, and then they themselves become their weed control method. This is our new Oregon Sunshine Field. We started as plants, and isn't that pretty? It's not just pretty because it's pretty, but it's pretty because I don't have the weed pressure that I did if I tried to start from seed, which I used to do. It was so hard, and the seed is so tiny that seed contamination was just, I was pulling out my hair all the time, and I don't have a lot. There are some species I can't use the pre-emergent on, and that self-heal is one good example. There's not very many. And in this case, I use, again, I put it into a relatively clean field, and I just throw a bunch of sawdust and fertilizer on it, because the sawdust really sucks all the nitrogen out of the soil. And then I can cut the weeds off when the plants are small, spot spray, and luckily prunella is a good filler in fast. It's a biennial pretty much, and so it sort of becomes its own weed suppressor as well. So the pros and cons, definitely weed control is much less of an issue because people don't want the weeds in my seed. I can't sell weeds in my seed. You can space them out nice, because the plants can get robust because you're spacing them out better. I can use cover crops just before planting on a stale seed bed. I can't. It's just sitting there chemically fallowed, so it loses some of its, nutritional value for the plants. But I can do this right before I've done a cover crop, till the cover crop in. That's what a cover crop's for. As I said, the optimizes this wild seed that's very, very precious. There's also some species that are very hard to grow. They have very funky germination requirements. Iris needs warm and then cold, and then Heracleum, which I'll talk about next, has all kinds of things. Sedalcias are very picky. They need some scarification. Geranium needs scarification in nature. So when you try to direct sow them, you just get these really horrible looking stems. The cons, we do have problems. We plant most of these in the fall, and again, erosion, frost heaves, they'll just heave right up out of the soil, and then they're sticking up, and then that's not good either. So we try to use sawdust to just try to keep the plants in place. It does take longer. It's much more expensive starting a field this way, because you have to grow them in a greenhouse. It takes longer for a crew to plant them. And then you can't really do huge fields this way because it is so labor expensive. But if you're getting a long-lived crop this way, it pays for itself almost in less than the full year. If you get once you get your crop coming in, it pays for itself easily. So as I said, Heracleum is one of the real strange ones. It's actually got a toxin in its seed coat for whatever evolutionary reason, and it has to be leached out of the seed before you can do anything with it. And so I tried to direct sow this, and I got absolutely nothing. I got no stand. And I looked up some protocols, and this way we rinse the toxins out of the seed, give it its cold stratification. And then actually at that point, I still only get about 50% germ, but I'm certainly getting more plants this way. And then I plant them in a very wet area, like you find cow parsnip, and the plants get huge, huge, robust, and make lots of seed. This would happen naturally in a wetland. The stuff would be leached out because the water comes up and the water goes down. So again, we're trying to learn, we're trying to mimic nature, but optimize that for seed production. So here you go, maximizing seed yield. So this is the ground cloth methodology. And this is used by, I learned about this from the Corvallis Plant Materials Center. I'm like, ooh, that sounds fun. And it's used by Institute for Applied Ecology for their smaller plots, place up in Washington doing small plots. So this is, I can use annuals and perennials. For annuals, it literally becomes a volunteer stand. You just let it drop its seed in the furrow, and up comes the same plants, the same crop the second year, third year, fourth year. I learned the hard way, though, that eventually it will poop out. And I got down from 68 pounds of this is Colincia grandiflora, and it just totally pooped out after 5 years. And I went, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it's like, well, there's nothing, I'm not turning the crop over. I'm not cover cropping it. There was nothing in it left, that the soil was completely depleted. And then I went, aha, I can add fertilizer. Hello, stupid. And went, okay. So I started adding fertilizer in the fall and in the spring. And then the plants started to dupe themselves out in the furrows. And I'm able to get back to not quite the beginning seed yields, but certainly a reasonable seed yield amount for the annuals. So this methodology is working really, really well. A few other things for growing this way. This is showy charweed. Again, super indeterminate. My goodness, it blooms and sets seed for 2 full months, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and taller and taller and taller. Plectridis congesta, again, very, very good on ground cloth, as long as you keep the plants happy. So how we get these into the furrows, into the ground cloth, this is pretty spiffy. So we make kind of a 2 to 3 inch, not too wide of a furrow between the ground cloth. We use this cute little Earthway precision garden cedar, which you can buy online. And then we just, it has a little, I can't point, I guess I can. Oh, there I can, I got a point. Okay, so it has this little furrow maker here. And so you can just go right into the soil if it's relatively clean, and that gets you really good soil contact. If it's a bed that has a little bit too high of a weed load, I'll just skip it right on top. We'll hold that part up and just sort of run it down the furrows in a couple different directions and just surface sow them. Of course, in the winter, you can get a lot of winter kill. That's what's really hard with things that germinate in the winter. The winds will tear up the ground cloth. We're using string now with newer cloths, kind of crisscross the string to really hold them down. And everything likes seed. So you have mice, voles, slugs you got to watch out for. And then we also use this method of using plugs. It works just fine, especially for the perennials. I don't plug annuals. I think that's just, well, I don't typically. I am going to do a little bit with Colincia because I have some precious seed, but typically I beef the seed up, I bulk the seed up before I do it on a big ground cloth. And here's a perennial that we do. This is Western Buttercup, ranunculus. It took me a while to, sometimes they get good crops and sometimes they don't. There's other issues with this, but this has worked really well. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to collect Western Buttercup. It falls off green. The seed is green, and it after matures, it after ripens, and then finally turns brown. So there's trying to do this with the standard cutting method. You just don't get any seed. So here's some perennials that have worked pretty well. Aquilegia, columbine, iris, jam, which is avens, grindelia, gumweed, lotus pinnatus, phacelia, ranunculus or Berchias, really working well, and viola. Some species have not worked well, and I've just torn the cloth back up, If they're really yummy to gophers, or I'll lose the field to gophers because them tunneling underground cloth. Just think about a whole bunch of soil being mounded up on the cloth. Also, some of them got very heavily diseased. Geranium origanum got very rusty. Lupinus albicollis got rusty. So here's pictures of, this is on cloth. So I had to pull the geranium back out of cloth production. This is the poor Lupinus albicollis, just, and then these things don't give me any seed because they're so indeterminate. I'll like lose almost 80% of the seed because there's no good time to cut them in a traditional sense. So how do we after we, what do we do with this seed? It works really well. We just cut the crop off, which I'll show you my cutting machine in a second, and just sweep it up after cutting. Got lots and lots of brooms. I buy brooms every single year. And shop back works okay if there's not a lot of residue, but you really just have a lot of stems, and you can kind of see this is just a lot of stem material here. But I'm getting 2 to 4 times the amount of seed that you do from a traditional method because it's all shattering onto the cloth. So 15 to 75 pounds depends on, the crop. I used holes in the beginning. The problem with the holes, you can kind of see we used a little propane torch to torch little holes in the cloth. And it made perfect sense for something like viola because it's a very small plant and it wants to spit its seed everywhere. But the problem we found with the holes is that then the crowns start to get really big, and then you're going to have to go back and cut more into the cloth just so that you don't choke the plant. So I've really moved mostly to furrows. So here's some columbine in furrows, and you make the furrows a little bit wider. We start with plants, and they seem to do pretty well. It's worked pretty well. And again, columbine, very indeterminate. You lose a lot of seed in a traditional method. So this lets us capture a very, very sought after plant. I think we're the only growers of columbine, and I started a new field because old field started to poop out. You only get about 6 years, 7 years out of it. And then some of the cloth, nice thing about the furrows is that then you can just pull old cloth up and relay it. So these longer lived stems, you can just replace the cloth as you need to. So ground cloth, what are the pros? Weed control is much less of an issue because there's 3 feet of clean ground in between these plants. Yay. And then you just have to weed between the plants or use, herbicide control. Annual fields don't have to be rotated. So if you don't have the land or you can't do the stale seed beds, it's working great for these annuals that are really weedy. And I don't have to flip them. I just have to keep them happy. You're getting all the seed that's produced. I was a little concerned about the black cloth getting too hot. So I've tried some white cloth on black. Jury's kind of out on that. I kind of see for some of them, it seems to make them happier. I thought the white would just reflect back the heat off of them because it's hot. It's plastic. And some perennials, as I said, are doing really well, and a lot of the annuals are consistent. The cons, some of the yields can go down because they're crowding. I mean, they really have to just duke themselves out and may the better plant win. So they're self-thinning. It has to happen. Again, the black and white idea, I kind of found out the hard way that once I just put white down all by itself, and it made a really great greenhouse. So that was a shock. Oh, there's also, if anybody's familiar with the Pulmoniaceae, so Microceras, Colomia, Gilia, they stick when they get wet because the seed, once it imbibes water, if it's during the summer, it exudes a mucilage, and then that sticks to the cloth. So we're always racing against summer winds when we're trying to harvest Colombia. And I've lost pounds and pounds and pounds. I've lost entire crops because they've stuck to the ground cloth. It's a hot environment, so you really do need to watch all kinds of nasty fungi. Again, the maintenance issue with cloth, the staples pull up and wind takes them away. And then it's a great, yummy place for slugs and mice to live and tunnel. And then they come out and they start eating the seed. And the gophers, as I've talked about. So the cloth takes a lot of maintenance. Again, you're having to weigh cost-benefit analysis. Am I getting enough for the labor input? Am I getting enough product out that outweighs that? So this is our cutting machine. I'm doing myself a time check here. Okay, good. Okay, so this is what we started with for cutting our crops. And this is called a swather. It's just a standard thing that cuts like grass seed fields. And then we started having to figure out how to capture the seed. So again, our innovations, this was really early on. And I talked to other growers and they said, yeah, but you can just put a tarp under it and that'll catch all the stuff you're cutting. So, okay, well, that sounds good. So we did that initially, and then they'd have to carry it in this tractor, down to a staging area, and that worked okay, but the guys had to crawl underneath here and things were poking them in the back, and well, that just sounded terrible. And then I came up with this conveyor belt idea. Yes, little old me. I'm not a mechanic, I'm not a farmer, but I had to learn quickly, and I didn't build it, but I figured it out, and we built this conveyor belt. So it cuts onto a conveyor belt and then it puts it into this trailer, and the guys were so happy. So really saved on labor. And then we found out that the these guys would have the stuff in the trailer, but they'd have to offload it by hand, and well, that was really annoying and not very fun. And so we came up with a hydraulic system for them, and now it lifts on, you could put it over the plastic, drive forward, and it just puts all the stuff out on the plastic to drive. So we're always trying to just figure out how we can mechanize as much as possible, to help with the crew and being safe, and then also, capturing as much of the seed as possible. So once we have the stuff out, then we have to figure out, well, how do you dry the seed? Okay, because it's been cut. And, this is not the stuff that's on cloth. It's already kind of dry. This is just traditional crops. And so you're kind of harvesting it maybe half shatter, half green. So you have to lay it out to dry. And we do have summer rains, so that gets very challenging. So we had to figure out how to deal with that. And here are some of the pros and cons of drying seed outside. So you could certainly just put it outside on grass, on plastic, and try to protect it. And we found that's certainly less expensive than I would need acres and acres and acres of a drying facility. And luckily, a lot of the seed, once it got wet, I did tests on the viability, and it seemed fine once it got wet. Grasses are like sponges, so that's what we aim to try to protect as much as we can. We have little greenhouses and we try to cover it up. It's hard on those shower days where it's like rain, sun, rain, sun, rain, sun, because it cooks underneath the plastic. That becomes a little greenhouse once the sun comes out, and that will kill the seed. And then if it gets wet and the crew doesn't turn them often enough, they get moldy, and of course, moldy seed dies. So this is what we use to thresh the seed. Again, we're all about kind of small, small, small. So back in the 50s, they made these cute little combines. I mean, only farmers call them, well, only I call them a cute little combine. We use them as stationary combines, and they work just perfect for our plots. We have 5 now that we use. This is called an all crop. So these are from the 1950s. We push we load the stuff on a little conveyor belt, and then it comes out, it thrashes them, and out comes straw. And then we have the seed down here. You can see the seed bag. We have it auger out the seed into the seed. It's seed and chaff in the bags, and that's what we take to the cleaner. And it's really fast. It doesn't take much time to clean them out. And this year we processed 150 lots in 2 months. So that's not too bad. Other methods we use, we have to get kind of creative. We use shop vacs sometimes, not as much as we used to. Again, it's very labor intensive, but we have this cute little unit here that we can take out to the field that has both our place for our shop vacs. It's a generator and an air compressor. We use it for cleaning out the combines too. Hand harvest, as I've said, like milkweed and mule's ears. Sometimes you're racing against these cute little guys, these goldfinches. Aren't they adorable? They eat huge amounts of seed because that's what they do. They're seed eaters. So sometimes we're racing against them, or seed maturation problems like with the milkweed. So we're using netting for certain crops. This is the mule's ears now. We use netting with that, with tarweed, all the tarweeds. What else? Fiddleneck with Amsinkia. Again, super indigent. Anything that the birds love, that it's just candy to them. We're having to put the labor into using bird netting. It's got a big enough hole though that allows the bees to go through. So I did because we're not netting it at full maturity. Sometimes I like to grow things under oak trees that like the shade. So here's our poor guys using a weed whacker. They love me. Guys, this was great. There's Oregon Sunshine has a super hard seed head that a combine can't break out. So their favorite thing to do is to put the cement roller behind a tractor and then just crush and crush and crush, and then they put it through the thresher. And we do that with lots of different Clarkias. We do that with those. Some of the Carricks are Chimalacola, which is an upland carex, just to break that seed out of the pod or off the head. There are other methods for harvesting that other people use. This is a plant material center up in Olympia. They have this really nice little plot combine, but it can't, look at that tiny little bag. It never worked for me because my plots are actually larger, and this is for literally a small plot. Increased plots or just things that make 2, 3, 5 pounds of seed, not for things that make 60 pounds of seed. And then they take that material and they dry it. So this is their drying facility. Again, this works much better for just small. They do make plot combines that are only $180,000. So that wasn't in the budget. So we definitely didn't want to go down a Wintersteger path. So I like my little all crops. This is another cool little machine. It's called a flail vac, and it's a brush harvester. This is used by the Plant Material Center for their aster, and it's a very soft brush. So they do make some really nifty machines for doing native seed. These are stuff designed for native seed. We do all of our own seed cleaning. We always trying to use what we have. We have a debearder instead of buying, again, a $10,000, $20,000 debearder. We have this thing called a hammer mill. We put some horsehair brushes on it, and it just macerates the seed off the stems. We have a couple different small seed cleaners and an air machine. So we do mostly all of our seed is cleaned in-house. And here's what I call the fruits of my labor. This is just, I have these small bins that I use when I make small seed mixes. So I thought that was kind of a nice little shot. Isn't this pretty? I'm sorry. This is something only a mother could love. Just fascinating to think, little teeny tiny seed, that every single, something that has 5 million seeds per pound, like Juncus, or no, that's even worse, Heuchera, and every single tiny seed makes a plant. It's just how that DNA gets packed into that, I don't know. So here's some of the sorrows I've alluded to. They are agricultural crops, but they're very yummy. So crowding can be a problem, stand longevity. It just breaks my heart to have to till them under, but once they're done, they're done. Critter problems, gophers, voles, mice. I have a whole talk on this. They eat everything. Lots of mildews and rusts. This last year was horrendously horrible with 12 inches of rain. For the early crops, they just became a puddle of mush. So really lowers the seed yields. We have native seed weevils. They're even native bugs that eat the seed. I have a checker mallow bug that just decimates everything. Native caterpillars, luckily not too many of those. Deers occasionally, birds, squirrels, moles, weeds, yuck, yuck, yuck. Here's an example. This is my sorrow. Just made me crazy. This was a beautiful stand of Peridoridia. Okay, Yampa. So excited. It's third year of production. I was going to get some seed. Turned around and every single plant had been destroyed by ground squirrels. We had just an explosion of squirrels in 2020. And they're native. I get it. No problem. That I'm trying to produce seed. And I had to try to trap them and unfortunately kill them. But again, I got to make a crop, and I only got like 16 little pounds out of this. So we've been really watching this and doing much better control. I have plenty of edge areas they can live, but they can't live in my seed area. And now it's back to 62 pounds for this crop. And in conclusion, I do have my seed production joys. So it's not all bad. There's lots of good. And it's the rare plant I just love the fact that we get to grow these rare plants and get them back out on these restoration sites. And in fact, the effort has been so good and so gotten enough seed and plants and protected plants. The Lomatian bred shyite is now a candidate for delisting. And also we had Nelson's checker mallow, and that's already been delisted because of efforts of growers to get these plants back out there. And this is my little thesis subject. This is Willamette Valley larkspur. And since the threatened and endangered plants all had recovery plans, they've been implemented. The goals are almost met. They're starting to focus on species of concern. That's the next level down. And I've decided I'm going to make my own recovery plan because it's my plant. And I've dutifully collected it from the little tiny populations that are still there, and many of them gone because they're roadside populations that have been destroyed. And with this new renewed focus, I've been able to talk with Fish and Wildlife Service and Greenbelt Land Trust, which has many, many protected sites within the narrow range of Lynn and Marion County. And we are working on getting those plants back out there. So this was my thesis subject in the mid 90s, early 90s. Oh my gosh. Yes. And I now grow it. I've rescued it. And now it's getting back out on protected sites. So this is my legacy. I've decided this was on my bucket list. And I've been very fortunate to grow the plant that sort of launched my career, so to speak. And so that has just been completely cool. And with that, I'm done. Now what do I do? Stop video?
Well, you can leave it on one photograph if you want. That's a beautiful.
Okay, that's my favorite. So I'm going.
This is Willow Elliott in the background. I am going to read the questions back.
Okay.
To you. Unless you want to read through the chat, I can just read.
No, I'm fine. But I've got my little video thing back on there. Okay, yes, I'm here.
Okay, did you want me to go ahead and read them off?
Please do.
All right. Let's see. The first one was a question about was mine, and when you put that beautiful white checker mallow, that Sedalcia, I was wondering what species that is.
Oh, that was campestris. That's tall. The one in the plugs, that's tall checker bloom.
Huh, it just looks so pale white. Some of them are just a white form.
It's a really very light pink, as in the
Okay.
tall checker bloom is the pale pink. And then the rose checker mallow is aptly named. That's the shorter one, a little more prostrate. And that's Sedalcium malviflora. I love that one in my garden is the favorite because it's just a little bit more well behaved.
Alba flora, and that's
Malviflora and like mallow.
okay. Native to the valley.
Yes,
Mhm.
our checker mallows are, let's see,
Coastal.
one of them is only to Oregon. Campestris, the tall checker bloom, is endemic only to Oregon, only to Western Oregon. It doesn't go up to Washington. Malviflora is native to both Washington and Oregon.
Okay, and then Nelson's is just Oregon.
Ah, see, there's those narrow endemics. Yeah, Nelson's is a threat. Well, now it's delisted, but it's a very narrow endemic to the north end of the valley, where Hendersonii is native to the south end of the valley, and Kuzikii is native to the coast.
Everybody got that, didn't you?
Well, because that's why they're actually all their narrow endemics are usually rare because they already were in a narrow niche. That's the same with the delphiniums. And so then you add habitat loss onto the fact that their range is so small. And that's why so many of those were listed.
Right. Can everyone hear me? All right. Raise your hand if you cannot hear me. I just turned up my volume. The next question is, can you provide more information on the pre-emergent? I believe you're talking about the herbicide. And,
Yes.
and you also talked about a burn down herbicide. What are those two?
So yes, so the pre-emergent, yeah, trade names. I can't pronounce the chemical name. We use a broadleaf one that's under the name trellis. That might be easier. TRELLIS. Gallery. It used to be named as Gallery. I shouldn't probably be saying this. I mean, I suppose they're listed for perennials. So we don't use them off-label per se, because it's a perennial herbicide, pre-emergent herbicide listed for perennials. And then we use one that's for grass pre-emergent, and that's prowl, which is pendimethalin.
And these are ones that you dig into the soil, you do not spray.
No. Those are fumigants. Yucky, no.
Okay.
A pre-emergent is just sprayed on with a boom application and watered in. So you either do it before a rain or you use irrigation, because it has to get into the soil. The whole idea is for that chemical to go into the top quarter inch to half inch of that soil profile.
Okay.
And then any weeds that's try to sprout, it's a growth inhibitor. It usually causes them to bolt. There are auxins in them. There's our chemistry for the day. And it tweaks them, and then they grow themselves to death. And so that's why it's a pre-emergent. It works killing the weeds before they emerge out of the ground. A post-emergent would be something like, Roundup, which of course kills everything, but you can use what's called burn down herbicides, which those are just a topical, kind of like an acid, and it's not really acid. Diquat is a burn down. So it top kill. It desiccates them. So on little tiny weeds, it'll desiccate them and then they die. So, but the perennials seem fine with that. You can take this burn down thing over established checker mallow and Oregon sunshine, and it's just going to topically kill tiny weeds. And then it's like running fire over them, which they had historically in prairies, and then they just green back up.
Okay. Now we have 9 new messages. We probably ought to move on. How about your fertilizer? Do you use an organic fertilizer or chemical, nitrogen? What's your favorite fertilizer?
Well, again, it's all agriculture. So, I mean, I would love to use compost tea. I mean, it would be so nifty. And I've looked
Mhm.
into that. But when I got 40 acres to fertilize, I'm using inorganic. So, my ag rep takes soil tests and figures out what my phosphorus levels are and all that other stuff that they do in the agricultural. Sometimes we have to lime, but not very often. So it's whatever they recommend, but it's going to have an NPK and some boron and all the other things there. So
Mhm.
I have to kind of treat, these aren't agricultural crops on large acreages. So yeah, I'd love to do inorganic, but it's too
And
costly.
when you use the inorganic, do you have to rotate your crops and move them to different areas each year? Or is it just gonna be okay to grow the same thing over and over in the same spot? I mean, it's perennials that
Oh,
can stay.
yeah, crop rotation is really interesting because again, I based it really on seed performance. I have some perennials that have been there. So like Lomatium nudicale, bare stem Lomatium. If the field hasn't been destroyed by gophers or other critters, I have a crop that is still producing after it was started for the West Virginia wetlands in 2006.
Wow.
Which is really kind of illegal in the seed industry. They just say, no, don't keep anything like over four years tops, or your yields are going to go down. And I'm looking at these plants. So then you have to go, wait a second. I broke my back to collect the seed in the wild from prairie sites that are no longer existing because they were on roadsides and now they're tilled and now they're gone. You think I'm going to take that plant out of production after 4 years just cuz?
Not Lynda.
So it's just look at the yields. I always save the G1 seed from the wild populations, and I try to use that really good genetic seed as long as we can. Keep that in stock, and then I keep stock of everything because these populations sometimes don't exist anymore. But you just have to go by yields. 6 years, and then you have to flip it. Camas lives forever. So because the bulb is so big.
Sure.
But yeah, it just really depends. But the fertilizer helps. I fertilize every year.
So you do grow camas. That's wonderful. And then you have a very nice compliment from a special person named Elaine. You probably know who it is. Elaine, whose last name starts with an S. And she says, you know who she is. Lynda says, please
Formerly of
consider,
Metro. Hi, Elaine.
yes, probably. Please consider writing a memoir if you haven't started one already. Your experience, lessons learned, not to mention your profound contribution to prairie and oak conservation, are so important to document and remember. The restoration community is forever in your debt. Isn't that nice?
That's nice.
Are you
Thank
going to write when is she supposed to write a book? In her sleep?
I guess that's on my retirement bucket list.
Yeah. And then you'll lose your sight. So what about plants that throw their seeds? Do you have to deal with lupin and California poppies? That do you grow anything that throws their seed around?
Yes. So spitting seed actually, and just seed, we do a lot of fencing. So we'll use longer pieces of cloth like Colomia. Okay. So, that thing, boy, does that shoot its seed. And so we create fences to hold seed in and stop it from going to adjacent fields and contaminating them. So same thing, Lupinus latifolius, because we grow it on cloth. We put up a tall fence to hold that seed in.
Okay. And when you're starting a production, where do you buy your seed? Do you have favorite sources, more than one?
But it's all wild collected.
You personally go out and collect it?
Me personally, yes.
Wow.
Okay. Or I've been very lucky to be gifted some collections from other people who collect in the wild. This is all source identified native wild collections.
Well, we happen to know somebody who has a seed bank who might have some extra, and he's in the meeting. How about the Berry Seed Bank? Would you like some of their seed?
Oh, giving seed to the Berry Botanic Garden.
You
Theirs
give it
is
to
a,
them.
theirs is a, there, that's like a, not a museum, but,
Yep.
that seed is there
Yeah.
as a, yes,
To
as
save.
a
So
hedge
it's the
fund.
other way around. You give them seed. Okay.
Yeah.
Someone know, let's see, who asked this question? Alan Underwood would like to know, are you monitoring the ecological impact of all your production practices versus the quantity and quality of the restoration achieved?
Well, that's a big question.
Let's see. Wonder about the need to be overly efficient as a business. Do you just can't worry about the quality of the restoration? Well, you're not there when it's planted in the restoration. That's
Oh, you mean when our seed is gone onto other people's sites, the end user.
right.
Yeah.
No. Do you know about the you keep up with the quality of the restoration achieved?
Well, luckily, for our contract with the Fish and Wildlife, our cooperative agreement, part of our memorandum of understanding is that I'm invited out to see the sites where our seed has been used. And then that will allow us to sort of figure out, well, that worked or that didn't work, and maybe we want more of that or less of that. I try to have people send me photos, and I do go out to most of these seeds. Well, a lot of them are on private lands, but a lot of them are on agency lands. And, we provide so much information on site preparation. And every time I get a phone call from somebody, my favorite is when somebody says, well, I just mowed my meadow I mowed my cow pasture, but I want to add some native seed. And you're like,
Okay.
it's sod. You're not going to sow seed into sod. And why are you going to put cows where you've put seed that's cost $150 a pound?
Okay.
Site prep is everything.
Paul Slichter says it's fascinating to see how the native seeds that he might plant in his own backyard habitat projects, how they're grown. Let's see. And how about the legality of collecting wild seeds and cuttings? Explain that you don't want everyone to go around doing this, and there is tell everybody about sustainable seed wildcrafting.
Yes. Okay. So number one, seed isn't regulated. So threatened and endangered species are on federal lands, or if you do have to get a permit through ODA to do that. But if you just want to go collect milkweed or columbine or colomia and it's just on private land, you just be nice and get the landowner's permission. It's not regulated at all. How to collect seed, the protocols are typically no more than 25% of all the seed of an annual population and 75% or 50% of perennials. You rarely could do that anyway, because you're never going to be there. They're always going to be half shattered. And then what I like to do, I call it the walk and pick. So you walk, pick. So you're just walking throughout the whole stand and taking just little bits from each plant, because you're trying to capture the genetics. And then I'll oftentimes just go, whoops, and then I just kind of, good karma, throw out a little bit here, and I sort of plant some over in those little gopher mounds. And so, but 25% of annuals, because you don't want to over collect on the annuals, because they need to set seed.
Right, to regenerate. Erica would like to know, does all that ground cloth just get thrown away after the 6 years or so that you can use it?
My boss doesn't allow many things to get thrown out. He's a very frugal man. He's used a lot of ours under roadbeds.
Oh.
Where they're going to put gravel.
Oh.
So the ground cloth, typically,
recycled?
I just sort of set it aside, and then he scrounges it up and used it on another farm under gravel.
Wow.
So yeah, the plastic that we lay things out on does eventually have to just get thrown away, because there's just no way to recycle it.
I guess
we try.
I'm not sure if Effie heard your whole answer on the pre-emergent. She would like to just elaborate a little bit more on what the pre-emergent chemicals consist of.
Oh, that again, I can't pronounce the active ingredient of there. So look up, as I said, trellis, TRELLIS herbicide
Mhm.
label.
Okay.
And prowl is pendimethalin. That one I can pronounce. So those are the actual chemicals in them. But again, can you go to Wilco and buy them off the shelf? Probably.
Mhm.
You got to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
They're ag chemicals.
So
I wouldn't use them in my yard.
they're
I
scary.
don't use chemicals in my yard.
They're heavy duty. You have to wear a hazmat suit when you spray
Oh,
it.
they're not that horrible, but again, there's you have to know rates and all that stuff, and
Mhm.
it's-
And your friend Carolyn Skinner is offering to let you come and collect seed at Liberty Hill, Camas Patch in St. Helens.
thank you. I wish there was way more things I want to collect than I have me left to collect, and I'm getting old and I have terrible knees. So, but thank you. I will take donated seed anytime.
If you want to collect them, Carolyn, you and Larissa, and then take them, you have to talk to each other. Tyler would like to know if you considered inoculating wood-loving mycelium into your sawdust in order to build healthy soil versus commercial fertilizers. Have you ever seen wholesale inoculating wood-loving mycelium for sale?
No, I mean, the sawdust is there after I do the crops. That is a problem for flipping a crop. And trying to get it to degrade so that I can actually use that field again is proving to be problematic, because once it's tilled into the soil profile, it sucks the life out of it. So I tending to use urea, sorry, high levels of nitrogen. If somebody wants to email somebody here that is on your end, let me know what that is. I could certainly look into it.
Like, let's see, Tyler, can you put in the chat give us a name of this wood-loving mycelium inoculating? I know what you're talking about, but is it liquid? Is it, just type in, if you're still here, what you mean by this product. And Gabriel Campbell, the director of the seed bank, would like to know if you have your collection dates recorded somewhere that he might be able to see. Like, when, what months, I believe he's getting it.
Oh, that's a trade secret. No.
Really?
I haven't, oh, actually, I don't care. Again, if anybody wants to, I have a document that says the windows of collections for the prairie species I've done. I'm trying to think of somebody
Is that
else.
on your website?
No,
Okay.
I don't. Yeah. I mean, again, the best way to find out is just to go back, and you're going to all of a sudden see them in flower, and then you're going to go see them in seed, and then you're just going to go, oops, oh shoot, it's all gone. Yeah, but there's bloom information out there. I don't think there's seed collection. I mean, they have it at the West Virginia wetlands, manuals for people where they collect seed all the time. Institute for Applied Ecology has one, seed collecting. Seed collecting is something, so it's a pretty small niche.
Right. And Elaine again says she's really wants you to be recognized that you have a very high quality product. It's PLS, pure live seed, that's been tested for germination rate. So you know what you're getting when you buy from Heritage.
Thank you. I'd actually like to put a plug in too for Willamette Wildings.
Yeah.
I know she's got seed packets. She's now selling them at a couple different places in Eugene, but she also does Sparrowhawk carries her seed. So if anybody's just interested in small packets, little Grammy packets for their garden, it's our seed that she repackages in small amounts.
And that's retail,
Wildings.
Okay, that's retail, not wholesale.
It's retail, yeah, retail amounts of seed for garden use. And she does a really good job. The packaging is really pretty.
Mhm.
But it's all our seed.
Oh, they're your seeds. Okay.
Yes, ProTime Lawn Seed also has 6 proprietary mixes of ours. So if you go to ProTime Lawn Seed, they have a native seed section, and it doesn't say Heritage Seedlings. They're called certain things, but if you look at the mixes and you compare them to our website, you go, I know those. Or again, if you email me, I'll send you their item numbers. And so they have a dry prairie mix, they have a wildflower mix, they have a butterfly mix, they have our woodland mix. So again, in smaller packages.
And what is your email address? And we'll type it in the
It's just,
chat.
well, you can just email sales@heritageseedlings.com. You can do the
Okay.
contact us page.
Uh-huh.
That's
Okay.
probably simpler, but it's just my first initial L and then BOYER at heritageseedlings.com.
Okay. Anna wants to know if you have time to talk about it. Is there anything else that Senator Merkley, let's see. Is there anything more than just him saying that one, making that one statement? What was this declaration that Merkley made? What was it called?
Oh, he's just advocating for, and I can't remember, I'd have to go back to the beginning of the talk. It was just a press release
Okay.
for funding for pollinator conservation in the West,
Okay.
focusing mostly on monarch butterflies, but pollinator conservation for butterflies it's all encompassing. You have a lot of monarch way stations. Well, great, but it's going to favor other critters too that would use it.
And for people who want to know all about what's in herbicides, you can go to www.growsmartgrowsafe.org. And is there such a thing as a biodegradable weed block cloth?
I don't think that would be probably very long lasting. I mean, the whole idea behind weed barrier cloth in any situation is to stop weeds, and the longevity of the plastic. I've had some stuff that has probably been down for like 8 years, 9 years. It would last longer if my guys would stop cutting it. Or gophers started, the longevity it's a lot longer than I think, but they cut it with the machine and it gets ripped and torn and things like that. So, but as far as the plastic itself, it's lasting a long time.
Okay.
So, which is good or bad, I don't know. But from why need it for? Yes, it needs to last a long time.
Tyler, I don't quite understand. You're saying something is rare and hard to find, and you have several species. Can you type in or just turn on your audio and tell us what are you talking about? If you're still there, Tyler. Do you have a business that you sell seed or plants? Sounds like you do.
I was just talking about the wood loving mycelium.
Oh,
can you hear me? Yeah.
Hi, Tyler.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Oh, you know this person?
No, I'm just saying hi.
Yeah. Caleb Thomas, or Caleb's on here as well, and we he's the one that's into wild seeds and kind of got me into listening to what you guys are doing. But I noticed you use the sawdust, and you can use wood chips as well, and use wood loving mycelium.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, as a fertilizer, kind of.
Well, actually, I'd have to be careful with wood chips. The reason I use, well, first of all, I have to apply them sometimes to like a half an acre of land. So we have a sawdust spreader that's specially designed to distribute sawdust in a nice 1/2-inch layer as a weed suppressor. So I use it usually as a weed suppressor in perennial fields. Wood chips you'd have too much space in between there, possibly, and then the wood chips would take a long time to degrade. The sawdust is a bad enough problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We just noticed that when you get a good mat of mycelium, you don't have enough wood chips. It just eats through it and it builds really healthy soil.
Okay,
And
so you're using it as a soil amendment.
yeah, it just kind of it does kind of block but it'll allow grasses to grow through or whatever else you're trying to grow through.
Oh, and so do you have a nursery, Tyler?
We have
Farm?
a small garden that we've been working on.
Okay. A couple things from, we got a couple people here from the Symbiop shop, it looks like. And that's in Portland on Powell Street and around 30th and Powell, Southeast. They have a fabulous shop and they sell Willamette wilding there. Say they're great to work with. And Elaine says it's good to know about the origins of Willamette wilding and be careful to find the native mixes at ProTime.
Yes, as I said, email me. I will tell you exactly the ones. There's 6, and I know the numbers. I can copy paste.
Okay, whoever get to know that ProTime carries some of your seeds as well. Oh, great to know. Okay, so you do sell to several other outlets. Is that what you're saying? Who then they package it? Is that what you do, Lynda?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, again, I've just been fortunate to find a few retailers. I'm welcome to any retailer who wants to buy and repackage. Chonards, whatever, in
you mean
Albany,
Albany?
Tangent. They do a little bit. Down to Earth actually and now has Willamette Wildings. So they're in Eugene.
So that's where someone can buy a package of it.
Yes.
And they can, so that answers your question. I think, Lisa, you could order it by mail from Down to Earth, which is in Eugene, but they have a huge
they have Willamette
online.
Wildings seed rack now.
And they're online. You can purchase.
Hey, Willow.
Yes.
Hi, it's Elaine here.
Yes,
I just want to say, I think you can order directly from Willamette Wildings
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah, she's got a great website. You can just order them from her.
So check that out, everybody, including Lisa. Let's see. Do you sell, let's see, can anyone place a wholesale order from you, like custom mixes?
You have $500 or enough friends with $500. You can buy anything. 5
people together and $100 each. And then you go get a big bucket, you get a huge bag of seed from her.
You can buy them by the ounce. I don't sell less than an ounce, but you can buy a pound of one of the mixes that makes everybody happy, or and then divide that up
and then you would mail it to them.
Yeah, we ship.
I see.
UPS.
You're shipping.
Yep.
You're shipping. Okay, of course. Okay.
Yeah, ounces and pounds. So,
Okay.
and then the mixes can't be less than a pound. And I don't know, we got like 12 mixes on the website, I think. I have one, my favorite is, and I developed this for ProTime, but then I was like, I have the Urban Meadow Mix.
Okay, very nice.
And I did that on purpose because I thought it was really catchy.
Let's yank out the grass and create a meadow in the front yard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very simple mix.
Beth wants us to know that Symbiop, Beth and Matt want us to know that Symbiop in Portland sells Nelson's Checker Mallow starts, which they're allowed to do now because this has been delisted.
Aha.
Can you explain to people who don't understand why you can't grow and get seed for a threatened and endangered plant?
So the checker mallows and delphiniums are a good example. But the concern with people growing and moving listed, the goal of plant recovery is to get these plants that are really in the toilet back to the appropriate sites. If anybody grows them and throws them around anywhere at all, that dissipates the recovery goals of making sure they get to the appropriate sites. If, for example, with the checker mallows, if Nelson's checker mallow landed in a Eugene wild area where it's not native to, and it's meets and greets Hendersonii, which is native to there, and they do hanky-panky because they're flowers, possibly you could have contamination and hybrids popping up. The larkspurs are the same way. So especially for narrow endemics, that's why they're regulated. With things that are more widespread, like Willamette daisy, they wanted to make sure again that they were choosing the gene pools. They decided to be recovery goals were very narrowly defined by recovery zones. So the Southern Valley, Mid Valley, West, East, that kind of thing. So that's why in Oregon, they've been very careful not to just let anybody put a listed species out anywhere and grow it
Okay.
commercially.
That is an excellent way for me to answer that question when I am taking people out on hikes and they see a rare plant and they want the seed. Let's see. Do you use any biological controls on your farm? Like ladybugs or other?
Oh, yes. Actually, that's a good question. Okay. Yeah. I have done in the past. Well, the first thing I'm doing is trying to create hedgerows and things between the fields and enhance the outer areas so that I can encourage more ladybugs and lacewings and the beneficials. I do not spray. I try to avoid insecticide. Obviously, that would be like against what I need to do. I have released lacewing eggs when I know I have areas with aphids. That's the biggest predator I have. Luckily, not a lot of is aphids on some things. So I've tried to do lacewing releases through our beneficial insectary company that I work with.
Great. So you do.
So that's good. And if I have to use something, I try to use a crop oil. And actually one time I went and we rescued as many ladybugs as we could before we sprayed the crop oil, because the ladybugs were trying so hard to do a good job. And then it was just getting decimated by the aphids. But luckily I don't have to do much. The seed weevils, I'm almost just giving up, and I can't. The checkermella weevils, they eat half of the crop. Half.
That's awful.